Welcome and thank you for joining myself and Dr. Felix this evening. I'm Brandon, the DMG brand manager for South Africa. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Felix. Dr. Felix has a 4-page CV, but in summary, he's a very clever man with a special interest in chemistry, the topic most of us avoid. Dr. Felix also plays a big role in the research and development department at DMG. Tonight, Dr. Felix will introduce to you Luxacrown, a very unique product. There's nothing like it on the market, and Luxacrown has two indications: long-term temporization and fabrication of semi-permanent composite crowns chairside. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Felix to start his presentation.
Yeah, I'm going to try to, because we had some minor technical issues previously, but let me try and get this done. Okay, I see already. I have to start this first. Okay, wait. So go back here, share the window, and now we should be basically in business. So Brandon, can you let me know if we can see the first slide? Okay, great. This is a big relief because I want to talk about a very interesting product. Brandon already said there's no other product on the market, and I would like to introduce you a little bit to Luxacrown. And in order to do this, I have sort of an introductory video.
The Trunk Monkey Theft Retrieval System. Because sometimes getting your car back is simply not enough. Another revolutionary idea, pending approval by Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, that's it. I want to talk a little bit about a revolutionary idea. And I want to also introduce you a little bit to Dr. Peter Norton. I was in Australia talking about that same product, and I got a very nice introduction by him. And I want to let you know what his introductory words were.
We're all aware that we, as dental professionals and our patients, constantly want greater performance from all of our dental materials in terms of strength, longevity, aesthetics, and ease of use. We've also all been let down from time to time by temporary restorative materials that just weren't up to the task for a particular treatment scenario, leading to premature failure of a restoration and a less than happy patient.
This is exactly, I think, what you also feel like. So we want to talk about how can we improve products that are already on a very, very high level and that are linked with very high expectations. Now, the thing about Luxacrown is that you get a crown or temporary bridge out of a cartridge. And when you get something new, then it's typically advertised as new. But I think this is just not enough. I think it should be termed revolutionary. And the reason for this, again, is there is no comparison. There is nothing else that was before that would do this job. And it's an intriguing thing how well it does its job. So let's look a little bit into this. Yeah, so on the last screen, you saw a lot of applications of things that you can do with Luxacrown. And this is maybe a little bit confusing, so I'm just being a little bit select today what I'm going to talk about. Well, first off, I want to talk a little bit about what is a long-term, high-end provision solution, and what would you call short-term. Maybe we can do sort of a little quiz here. If I showed you these restorations and would ask you to estimate the longevity of each of these restorations, I'm not completely sure what your guesstimate would be, but I would say everyone would agree that gold is the gold standard and that we would probably attribute something like 20, 25, 50 years maybe even to a gold restoration if well done. Now, for an amalgam restoration, I'm not sure again what you would say, but probably something between 10 years, 8-10 years probably. And the intriguing thing is, what would you say about a composite restoration? How long does a composite restoration last? And the answers that I get really vary. I had some that say just a few years, some say about 5 years, and some would say, oh no, I do wonderful composite restorations and they last for a very, very long time, at least as long as amalgam restoration, so maybe 10 years. Whatever your thoughts are, but we can see that the term permanent is not really permanent. It means it's a restricted period of time and it depends on what you're using. So if we are having a crown made of composite, what are your expectations for the longevity of something like this? And naturally, we have temporary restorations where we would say a long-term temporary restoration is probably something that lasts up to a year. And that for some materials is really, really stretching it. But others would be okay. And naturally, solutions in the mouth are different. There's no two mouths that are the same. And therefore, the stresses put upon this is very different. So how can we determine something like longevity, and what can we do with a long-term provisional? And I'd like you to meet Dr. David Rice, and I'll start the video for you now.
Hey guys, listen, I'm just off a virtual call with my team in New York, and as we try to navigate these new, post-COVID re-entry waters, we strategize every single week to be better. We try to innovate. So I want to talk to you about a product we've been using for a long time that all of a sudden became even more relevant, and that's Luxacrown from DMG. Love it. Always have loved it. You guys have probably heard me talk about it a number of times, but I want to talk to you about why we're focusing on it right now. 3 big reasons, really. Some are ours, some are our patients, and most really are both. So reason number 1 is low cost. That's to you and me in our practice, right? We're not bringing on a lab fee, whether we CAD/CAM or not. That's great for us in our practice. It's also low cost to our patients. So we charge about 25% of our full crown fee, for example, as we do for a Luxacrown. Awesome. Our patients are very appreciative of that right now. They've been off of work for 2-3 months, some of them, and financially, this is the big win. So second thing for us, it's limited chair time, right? This is a huge win, and I'm not sure if you guys are doing this in your practice or not, but we want to decrease flow of patient in our building. We want to keep revenues up. So whether it's a patient who's coming in for restorative, and we can limit our chair time so we can turn a room over and allow time to sterilize properly in between, or bonus, I hope you guys are doing this, if we're pulling a patient from hygiene onto the restorative side or restorative onto the hygiene side, but those are wins in limiting chair time to make that stuff happen is huge. And then the third reason for us is really longevity. So this is a semi-permanent restoration. We can buy 5 years of time with Luxacrown. I think that's going to make a lot of your patients happy. It's certainly going to make us happy in our practice. So guys, pay attention to things that work. Sit down with your teams, create strategies, think a little bit out of the box. I know for some of you, you think temporary restoration versus permanent. Luxacrown is an amazing semi-permanent restoration that buys us 5 years. You're going to make a lot of your patients happy. Hope you guys have a great day. Cheers.
So why is he saying these 5 years? Now, let's take an example that has nothing to do with dentistry. Here in Hamburg, they make the Airbus A380. At least they put them together and then they ship the final product or fly the final product. Now, if you're the engineer who designed the A380, and you know that there's 500 people plus in this plane, you want to make damn sure that this monstrosity doesn't fall out of the sky. So how do you do it? Because at one time or another, it's going to fly, and it's going to fly with these passengers. So you want to make sure that even before they get on board, you know damn well that this is going to work. And how you do it is really stress testing every single component and then the whole thing together before you even do that. And it's the same with dental materials. I mean, the performance in the mouth is very difficult to predict, but there's generalized tests that you can do that give you an idea of how it will perform. And one of these tests is called a fatigue test. It's loading the material, but not to the point where it immediately breaks, but to about, depends, 70, 80% of the fracture load, and then releasing that load, loading it again, releasing the load, loading it again, and so on and so forth. Now, 3M developed a test where you load a sample like this with 50 newtons, which is about 50 kilos, and then increase the load to 150 Newton, and then go down again to the 50, to the 150, and you do this about every 2 seconds. And according to the 3M ideas, this done for 1 million cycles, 1 million times, this will give you a prediction of will it last for 5 years or not. Now, if you're a conservative company like DMG, you say, okay, it's nice and fine, but we want to be absolutely sure that it will perform. So we are not only loading it with 50 newtons, we are loading it with 70 newtons, and we are increasing not only to 150, but to 170 newtons. And we are going to do this whole thing not just for 1 million cycles, we're going to do this for 1.5 million cycles. And if the product performs in this setup, then we'll conclude, okay, it's probably good for the 5 years. And this is exactly what we do. So we have this sample being loaded and unloaded from 70 to 170 and back every 2 seconds. So that's what we call a cycle. A cycle. 2 hertz, 1.5 million cycles. That means that one single measurement for one particular sample lasts 34.7 days, which is more than a month. So it's a pretty slow process coming to the opinion that, yes, this is going to last. And you can, if you watch this now, this is not the Luxacrown, but I needed something, Luxacrown, this is something else to show you how it behaves, because that flexes a little bit nicer, so you can see this waveform traveling through the sample when we load and unload, in quote, the product. Now, this is really what we've done, and we also initiated a live people study. Unfortunately, after a year, COVID came, and ever since the whole project has broke down because they couldn't get the patients back, they couldn't check the situation. It's an awful mess. However, we are really sure that it works for this period of time because we have dentists that have used it from the very start, and they have patients where it lasted 5 years or even longer in their mouth. So there is some clinical data, there is some good prediction of the performance. Now, this product comes in a cartridge that is basically the same cartridge as for LuxTemp. And for this reason, you get about the same amount of product out of it. So you can do about 36 single crowns, 23 3-unit bridges. And I know that our Asian dealers say, what? We can get way more out of this, but this is a, say, conservative estimate. Your results can vary. None the same, it is quite an amount that you can get out of a single cartridge for this. And it comes in 5 nice shades, A1, A2, A3, A3.5, and AB1. And what you'll notice is that it is not like Luxatemp. It handles pretty much the same. It uses the same workflow. So if you can do a Luxatemp or other temporary crown and bridge material provisional, you can do a Luxacrown thing. So I'm really sure about that. And it's not much of a difference, but I'll address the differences that occur and that are present and are necessary for a product like this. However, when you handle it, you'll notice differences in the handling in terms of how it cuts, how it feels when you polish it, how it polishes. So this is all advantages that you're going to appreciate when you have the product in hand. I played recently a game of Trivial Pursuit, and I got this interesting question, which I must admit at that time I didn't have the correct answer. And the question was, what travels through massive glass with a speed of 5,300 meters per second? And initially I thought maybe it's sound, but no, it's not sound. And for light, it would be very, very slow light. But the correct answer is it's a crack. And I want to show you this video here, which if you watch these guys, these are from Mythbuster.
Go ahead.
I feel like we've been swindled.
Swindled not. We have just experienced the power of compressive strength. It does, however, have an Achilles heel. Take those nippers right there and nip the backside of the tail of this Prince Rupert chop and watch what happens. Wait, cue the high-speed camera. Okay, here we go. Whoa! That was even cooler than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I think it is cool to see 5,300 meters per second and really be able to watch it. But the thing that we are seeing is really a very, very big problem. Having a crack in a material is the deadliest thing you can have. Now, let's watch a little bit as an introduction again from the Mythbusters here.
Pop quiz. If you were able to look back on the present from deep in the future, what age would you say we're living in?
Is this a trick question? I mean, I want to say information age, but it seems too obvious. Can I say more than one age?
Yeah, I think it is safe to say that we are living in more than one age.
So yes, we are living in the glass ceramic age and the resin and plastics age. And actually, if you combine the two, we can say we are living in the composite age. And this is really what makes it a very intriguing possibility that you can do stuff with composites that you can't do with glass or ceramic and that you can't do with resin alone. And if we take an example like here on your phone, you don't want to have that spider web running on your phone. But it's not as fragile as it looks. It's really pretty tough already to break it. However, if you start the crack, then you're in deep trouble because typically then it runs all through the surface and it destroys your phone. So the question that engineers have is, how do we prevent either the crack from starting, or how can we prevent that the crack travels through the whole material and destroys it? And the answer to question number one is really to avoid the cracks, for example, by having insanely high strength, like for monolithic zirconium dioxide restoration. And I admit that we would like to have that approach and that possibility in the resin composite material, but we don't. So what is the option within a composite material. What can we do that we can't do with a ceramic, for example? Yeah, so this is the thing that we came up with, and it's part of several strategies for DMG products to increase the longevity of these materials, because the crack, no matter what material you have, is really their worst enemy. And while we cannot prevent cracks from starting, we can limit the initial onslaught of the crack formation, so that not every impact that would otherwise crack the material will actually do that by dissipating the stress within the material. And this is done by these molecular shock absorbers. And if they work well, then really what happens is that not just one single region has to deal with the stress, it's dissipated over a wide area, and for that reason diminish, and then we are in a subcritical area and will not crack the product or the material at this stage. So this is the idea, and this is really what we see in these fatigue tests, what we see in the breakage tests that we do. And see the same thing here. So this is our regular material without any shock absorber protection. But if we place this stress ball here and I hit it, even can hit it harder than the tile before, then the tile survives it really well, because the shock energy, the crack energy, does not come into contact really with the product itself, with the material, and it survives. And this is what we are seeing. So this is just sort of a visual idea, to give you a visual idea what happens within the material. Now, how the product works, we can see in this video here. So the workflow, as I said, is very similar to a Luxatemp Provisional. So you have a matrix that you use for the material, and you do that prior to the prep. Then you do the crown and bridge prep. If you have a core buildup, definitely isolate. And then you just, like with Luxatemp, put the product into the matrix, replace that on the situation in the patient's mouth, wait about 1:45 to 2 minutes, and then remove the still somewhat elastic material from the mouth. So that's no different to Luxatemp, but here you have to be a little bit more careful that you don't overextend the time to where it becomes really hard, and where you can only trim it really with the rotary instruments. Now, for polishing, these silicone polishers with the diamonds, these are really nice, but you can use the normal approach with goat's hair brushes, felt wheels, whatever. They work fine, and you can use a normal composite polishing approach, and it'll do the job. So the important thing is that you polish, because if you want to use something like that for a long period of time, then rather than having a rough surface that will accumulate plaque and so on, you need to have a highly polished surface. So that's difference number one to, say, a Luxatemp provisional. And difference number two is if you want to go for a very long-term solution, then you need to cement with a permanent cement rather than a temporary one. So depending on how you want to use it, long-term, you need a permanent cement. Short-term, you can use temporary cements for that. So if you're just going for the nice handling and stuff, then it's actually not. If it becomes sort of super duper Luxatemp for you, you don't necessarily need to go into the permanent cementation. However, I want to show you a few cases and where we can see the benefit immediately. So this is a case from Dr. Pavalucci in Italy. And what you see here is a patient that came in with his front tooth restoration broken off, and his dentist was on holiday. So what can you do? You want to give the patient naturally a good intermediate solution that lasts until his dentist comes back from vacation. And sometimes that's a little bit more difficult than other things. The good thing was he had still the other part of the broken off restoration. But the bad thing is, you can see there's a lot of caries here. This is why it is finally broke. Obviously and likely the bonding system failed, and then you got secondary caries, and the whole restoration failed. So he had this broken off part, and that was just basically cleaned and glued back onto the existing situation in order to be able to create the matrix. And the matrix here was done with honeycomb, which is an exceptionally nice handling addition cured silicone material. And it was done as a high precision impression to minimize excess removal later on. So with this as a matrix, the remaining tooth was cleaned up. The root canal was redone, and it was done with a nice glass fiber post restoration, and finally a nice core build-up with Luxacorzette, which is really probably the nicest core material you'll ever encounter. Now with this, the prep was done, and if you have a fresh core build-up crown here in resin, then you definitely need to isolate this well, because if you put on some Luxatemp, or in this case Luxacrown, then this composite material will naturally bond, chemically bond to the core material, and that will make it very, very, very hard to get rid of and to retain your nice prep. So isolate and then inject the Luxacrown material into the matrix, seed it over the prep, clean up the margins and so on, and there you are. You can polish to a very nice high gloss polish very fast and efficiently, and then the patient can go home. Now, this is certainly something where you're not too concerned about the longevity of the material, and you're not too concerned about the strength of the material either. But let me show you a case of a dentist from the UK, Dr. Shiraz Khan, and he says, and this sometimes makes me cringe a little, I love this stuff. I do things with it that I would not dare dream doing with my regular temporary materials. And actually he's using Luxatemp. So what happened? This is a nice patient. He wanted to do some veneers on his. And you can see this is a bruxis. So this is a high stress for the restorations. And it's, well, okay. It was basically a good idea to say, okay, I use whatever I use. I use Luxatemp, and it's a high strength material, and so far it does done me well. So he did this. He did a typical impression, the wax up, the preparation, and he put some Luxatemp on him. But if you look at that canine, you can already see the harbinger of bad things to happen, because you see already an abfraction there. And normally Luxatemp is not that likely to do this. So after a few days, the situation looked like this. Restoration was completely lost. And he had to do it again. And he thought, what can I do with this bruxist? What can I give him that is not going to destroy within a few days? And the answer was Luxacrown. So really, with the Luxacrown, he was able to manage to sort of retrain the function of this patient and bring it to levels that normal ceramics can endure. And that was done with the help of Luxacrown. So really that managed to do the trick. I'm not saying this is going to happen with all the bruxists, but it gave me a very, very good indication of what this material is able to sustain. Now, this is Dr. Piwowarczyk from the only private university in Germany, Witten-Herdecke, and he says, I'm really still constantly amazed what modern materials can do. And I can tell you, I am sometimes too. It's a fascinating thing for me to see what modern materials can tolerate. And this possibility to really sustain high stresses and endure long-term restorations, this is something where Dr. Stefan Kubi comes into place. I am a great fan of his because he also publishes a lot in Style Italiano. And Style Italiano is the biggest worldwide, the biggest dental website. And they have an interesting philosophy. And the philosophy is that whatever you publish there, it has to be peer-reviewed, so your colleagues will look at what you publish, and it has to be teachable, it has to be repeatable, and it has to be aesthetic. And he sort of developed an interesting new way of doing posterior full mouth rehabilitations. So basically, it follows the same approach that Galip Gurel and Pascal Magne developed for the veneers, but transfers this to the posterior case. But in this case, I don't want to show you this. I want to show you a case of an implant situation. So what we have here is the temporary implants on the temporary abutments, I should say, on the implants. And what you want now is really place a provisional onto these. So you cut them to length so that they don't interfere with the lower jaw movements. You protect the screw access by whatever. Here's cotton. You can use Teflon tape, whatever. And then you have a wax up with a silicone impression. And from this, you just fill it up with the Luxacrown. So it's going to sit and fit over the temporary abutments. And the trick is really to leave this in a little bit longer than you would normally do it. Normally you would remove this in the rubbery phase, but here you basically wait for about 4 minutes until it's completely cured. Then you get access to the screws, unscrew the restoration, and finish it. And part of that finishing process is, as you see here, to create a pre-shaping section on the underside of the provisional to allow the soft tissue pre-formation already at a very early stage. And the nice thing about these composite restorations here is that you can change that all the while going along and adjusting that to your needs and to the healing gingiva. So an interesting solution here as well. And this is probably why you look at the material and you find new ways of dealing with it. Dr. Rice didn't mention it, but explicitly, but in fact, he's doing it. He's using this to phase out treatments for his patients. So because of the long longevity of restoration, and because you can do the restoration chair side, you can do things that wouldn't be possible with other products. So even if you wanted to have a long-term provisional, you would still need to provisionalize for the provisional, the long-term provisional, to arrive. And basically, you don't need to do that anymore with Luxacrown. So you can do it in one go. And this is what he meant with we are not getting any lab costs at that stage. But what he's also referring to, but not explicitly explaining, is that if a patient has a need for multiple restorations, and COVID may be just such a thing that patients didn't go into the practice, they didn't come by for their regular checkups, things got a little bit worse than they would have normally gone. So it's not uncommon to see patients now that need multiple restorations. And the situation, as he explained, is not the best because patients don't have that much amount of cash flow that they might otherwise may have had. So for them, it's very interesting to have a phased out treatment. Yes, we will do a treatment right now here, but we will give you the final restorations for the 3-unit bridge in a year, and we will give you the final restoration for the crown that you need in 2 years. So this is what really makes this product an intriguing and interesting possibility to use in your practice. And I'm absolutely sure that when you think about possible uses, you will find a myriad of things that you could do with this. And that's perfectly fine. It's really, you'll be surprised what it can do if you think hard enough about it. So what we watched just in this video was not, as Dr. Kubi would be the first to admit, that is the absolute state of the art for implant-supported temporaries. But it is a very simple way to fix this bridging gap that you have for the time between surgery and final restoration. And not many materials can actually do that for you. So it's interesting. And you can, as I said, because it's a composite material, add onto it, you can subtract to it. So the full mouth rehabilitation thing gains another impetus. And you can do a myriad of things, as I said, with just one simple material. And if you want some more ideas, basically, of what you can do, we have for download available a case book. We call it a case book, where you find different scenarios where you could use the product. And if you want to get a little bit inspiration for what you could do for your patients, then I would suggest you either call Brandon, Wright Milners, whoever, and they will direct you and give you the information that you need to do stuff like that. So that was basically what I wanted to tell you today. And I know I'm a little bit early, but I didn't want to overdo it. I just wanted to give you a little bit more time for questions. And with this, I'll switch back. Let me see if I can do that. And then hopefully answer a number of questions that you have. So let me see if I can come back. So you should see me back now, Brandon.
Hello, yes, I can see you, Doctor.
Okay, good. Is there any questions already?
I see, Doctor, well, it's not a question.
Yeah.
But Dr. Cornelius said, I did 10 Luxacrowns on a friend on teeth 1.5 to 2.58 years ago and only replaced them this year with porcelain fused to metal crowns. He had edge-to-edge bite, and I was amazed at the durability of these semi-permanent crowns. He was a
Thank you
coach
very much for the feedback. Yeah.
and endured most of his enamel, which made us do the Luxacrown while he weans himself off coke.
Yeah, I think that's also a nice feature, that you have a very tooth-friendly opponent for the opposing teeth.
Yes. And then we have a question here. What is the bonding protocol?
The bonding protocol is either you use a self-adhesive cement, which makes the bonding to the tooth structure simpler. It will bond to the Luxacrown because it's a fresh composite surface, and you have a resin cement. So Permacem 2.0 is a good intermediate term solution. Otherwise, it's important that your bonding system works well with the cement, the resin cement that you're going to use. So that's the main concern that you have. The bonding between the cement, the resin cement, and the Luxacrown is not so much an issue, but the interface and the connectivity between the bonding system and the tooth structure, that's more of a problem.
And then what is the best way to bond to a Luxacrown if it chips after time?
Okay. That's an interesting thing. We have a product, I hope we do, in South Africa. I'm not sure. Brandon, do we have Luxatim Glaze and Bond?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So that's a really cheap option also, but it's a very effective option. And it's actually my preferred way of doing it. So Luxatim Glaze and Bond can be used, as the name implies, as a glaze. I would not recommend, and I'm saying this strictly as a replacement for the polishing procedure on the Luxacrown. You can do that for the short period that you normally have a temporary. That is what it is designed for, but it's not designed as a glaze for the Luxacrown. However, the end bond means that it is a very good bonding agent for basically anything acrylic with anything other acrylic. So if you would have something break off, needed a repair, whether it's a Luxatim repair or a Luxacrown, does not matter in this instance. You can do it with this product. And the procedure would basically be, you roughen up the surface a little bit, and then you apply the Luxatim Glaze and Bond, let it seep in for a few seconds, then light cure, and then you should have an oxygen inhibition layer that you can bond to with other acrylics.
Okay. Are there any more questions? No. Just see in the question box. When a tooth has a little remaining structure, what would be the best and easiest way to use Luxacrown to build and recreate a tooth shape?
I'm not sure if I understand that question correctly.
So if there is no anatomy of a tooth, what is the best way to build
it was already
up?
destroyed, you have nothing, no reference, no nothing?
Yes.
Okay. So basically you have to build up something. Either you go very simple in wax and the patient just bites on it and you get a very, very rough, not a good situation, not a good long-term basis, but that would create something that you can live with for a while and then improve that. You could probably also, what's sometimes done is use strip crowns, reline them. Some people even use a bite registration material for that because it's fast, and then you have to be fast too. But a possibility, yeah. Otherwise, other than that, it's really have a wax up from a technician and then take it from there. That's the simplest, most effective and precise way of doing it if you want to do it correctly. The others are sort of an improvised situation amendment.
Okay, and then can the longevity or hardness be bettered by heat treatment, for example, in a microwave should a glaze be used?
That's an interesting question. We haven't actually tried something like this. I can't honestly tell you. Gut feeling, no, I don't think it would improve the situation much.
Okay, and can you show a prep for 3-unit bridge? I think Dr. Buketsu will send you some information on that through your representative.
I can send you. Brendan, a case.
Yes,
from Greece.
Dr. Buketsu, if you can just send us your contact details or ask who's your rep, and then we can get that information through to you. Okay, then someone, Dr. Does not look if there is. Following up,
nice. We are getting sort of a discussion here going. Yeah, that's
following up on the build-up question. Should you build
Yes.
up with Luxacrown or do pre-operative build-up with composite first, then make a Luxacrown?
Can you repeat the question? I just didn't get it quality-wise.
Following up on the build-up question, should you build up with Luxacrown or do pre-operative build-up with composite first, then make Luxacrown?
Yeah. So what I would recommend is use your favorite core build-up material. The important thing is not what the core build-up is. I didn't recommend actually the Luxacrown. Maybe that was not clear, but I recommended Luxacore. Okay, it's a lot of Luxa stuff, but the point is, if you have a core build-up made up of a resin material, then you really need to isolate this, because otherwise you cannot take off the crown in its temporary phase when you want to finish it. So that's really critical in a situation where you finish everything intraorally, which I think is not ideal. Then you could basically no cement, no nothing. It just bonds to the core build-up and say that's okay. But normally I would prefer to get it off, finish it properly, and then cement it.
I think you sort of answered the question, but to prevent adhesion to your core build-up, what do you prefer for isolating the core?
Yeah, actually, a lot of people use Vaseline or something like that. And personally, it works, but it's a little bit nasty to get off. You need alcohol or something to get it off. So some water-soluble isolating media is, for my feel, a little bit nicer, because you just spray it off and then it's done.
Okay. Any more questions from the delegates? Just for interest's sake, there is a medical aid code in South Africa, 8137, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, yeah, now it gets tricky.
No, that's not a question. I'm just telling the delegates.
Oh, okay.
8137 that you get charged through medical aid. It doesn't seem that we have any more questions. I'll give it 2 more minutes just to make sure there is another one popping up. What is the best way to reline Luxacrown?
To reline? Oh, that's an interesting question. Okay, let me explain a little bit why I think it's an interesting question. The first time I got a question about how do you reline Luxatemp, I thought, what are they talking about? Why would you need to reline a Luxatemp provisional? It just fits. And then it came to me that this were dentists from Mexico, and they were using these powder liquid systems that you would take off, put on, take off, put on, and then have a very imprecise intaglio of the crown. So I'm not sure if this goes in the same direction, but if it is, you don't need to reline this. It's a very precise fitting restoration. However, if you wanted to do it because you cut out the inside just for whatever reason, and now you want to reline it, if it's fresh, you don't need to do anything. You can just put on the cement or whatever, or Luxacrown. It'll reline it perfectly, all right. If it's older and used, and this is the question, you took it off, you removed the cement and so on, and now you want to make it fit again, then actually, again, the glaze and bond would be a very, very good option to ensure proper bonding to an older surface like this.
Okay, thanks, Doctor. And then what water-soluble separating agent is used? Glycerine?
No, that's a little bit too liquidy. So there's gel forms of glycerol. There's like these oxystop gels, but you have to try out a little bit. Not all of them work really well, but if you find something that works, that's a good choice.
Okay. I think that looks like that's all the questions. Just want to make sure. Yes, that's all the questions. Thank you, Dr. Felix. And
okay, I know we are a little bit early, maybe. No, not really, huh? I'm not sure.
a little bit early, but that's okay.
A little bit early, yeah. So if you still have some questions after this discussion, I'm sure you can send them in to Wright Millers, and they'll forward them to me, and I'll get back to you.
Yes, no worries. They can email all queries to me,
right,
or their representatives can just send me the questions.
All right. So let me say thank you very much for your time and being with me today. And I hope you find something interesting and as intriguing as I find the Luxacrown to be. Brandon definitely is a fan of it.
It's a great product for South Africa.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Felix.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.